To announce his decision on the Iranian nuclear deal tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time from the White House. This follows a spat with former Secretary of State John Kerry, who the Boston Globe reported last week met with the Iranian foreign minister in recent months to strategize a bid to preserve the deal. Trump slamming Kerry on Twitter, saying the United States doesn't need John Kerry's possibly illegal shadow diplomacy on the very badly negotiated Iran deal. He was the one that created this mess in the first place. Joining me now on the panel, Harmeet, Dhillon, trial lawyer, also Fort O'Connell, Civic Forum PAC Chairman Ron Christie, former Special Assistant to President George W. Bush, and John Glazer, Cato Institute Foreign Policy Studies Director. Let me start with you, Ford. It was shocking to me that John Kerry muddling in this situation. I don't know. Listen, we all kind of have a hunch of what the president may say tomorrow, but I thought that was pretty despicable.
I think you're absolutely right. Imagine for a second if Condoleezza Rice had meddled in President Obama's foreign policy. The Democrats and the media would have gone bonkers up and down Pennsylvania Avenue. But because it's President Trump, guess what? We hear nothing but crickets. And Kerry says, gee, the American people want to weigh in. Sorry, Secretary Kerry, you're undermining a duly elected president's foreign policy. It's his job to decide. It appears all signs indicate he's going to withdraw, and he's right because it's a flawed policy. The Iran deal is flawed because it's aimed at containment of a nuclear weapon rather than denial, and we got to be going after denial.
John, of course, our European allies are urging us to stay in the deal, perhaps push for tweaks in it. More recently, even today, I think it was Boris Johnson making the effort. Is this right, or are they speaking specifically with respect to how this deal impacts Europe, particularly economically, since they do a lot of trade with Iran, or is this the best possible deal we can get?
I think it's a pretty good deal, and I think the mistaken idea about this paving the way for an Iranian nuclear weapon or containing an Iranian nuclear bomb is wrong. Some elements of the deal expire over the course of 10, 20, 25 years, but the most important elements of it remain permanent and are indefinite. That includes expanded inspections to all of Iran's declared nuclear sites, as well as a commitment by Iran never to build nuclear weapons, a commitment which can be verified through these intrusive inspections that the deal provides for. And if we back out of the deal, we're just going to throw away that visibility into the Iranian nuclear program.
Harmeet, do you think there's visibility? The way it seems to me is that Iranian officials have a long runway, a long time period by the time we announce we want to make these official inspections and actually can do them.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more, Charles. And, the other flip side of this coin, which the president has been talking about, is we don't have any transparency into how this deal was reached and other relations with Iran under the Obama administration. And I think what we're going to find out when we dig further into this is that there was some deep state involvement in all of this. And I think that's why Kerry is risking his reputation and potentially legal action with this desperate backstage diplomacy. I think it's highly suspect, highly unusual and irregular, and it does lead to some questions that we're going to need to get answered.
I agree 1,000%. And I will say that a spokesperson for John Kerry released a statement. We've got part of it we'll share with the audience here. This is, again, from a spokesperson for John Kerry saying, I think every American would want every voice possible urging Iran to remain in compliance with the nuclear agreement that prevented a war. All right, well, Ron, you understand diplomacy as well as anyone else. I don't think that's what John Kerry was doing. Nevertheless, where do you stand on this?
Well, good evening to you, Charles. This is John Kerry representing himself, the way that he disgraced his country by throwing medals over the White House fence back in the Vietnam War. Now he's disgracing himself by trying to undermine the president's legitimate authority to conduct foreign policy. Let's recall that back in 2015, 47 Republican senators sent an open letter to the Iranian regime saying this should have been a treaty. It should have come before the American people and this body. And that, frankly, is why I hope President Trump throws this thing out tomorrow. Let the American people decide what our best course of action is, not a disgraced former Secretary of State.
John, on that note, again, are you suggesting there would be no real alternatives, that we can't get a stronger deal, a deal that's not a de facto countdown to Iran eventually getting a nuclear, possessing a nuclear weapon?
Well, Trump, I think, views this as if we pressure them, if we threaten them, if we throw bombast at them, they'll capitulate. And I don't think that's what's going on. In fact, there are hardliners in Iran that said from the beginning you can't trust the United States. And now that Iran has fully complied with the deal, as everybody says, even Trump, If we back out, they'll blame us, and that'll bolster the argument of the hardliners in Iran that they need to pursue a nuclear deterrent, because it appears like the United States, that's their only assurance against regime change.
Ford, I think the problem, though, is that we're not sure if they're complying because of the games that they can play with the current arrangement. It's if I call someone in California and says I'm going to come and search a house next month, whatever I'm looking for might not be there when I get there.
No, can I just speak to that?
Let Ford speak to it, then I'll bring it back,
That's a great point that you make here. We talk about inspections, but we do not have full inspection power when it comes to the Iranian nuclear program. They can also continue under this current deal to develop a delivery system through their ballistic missile program. The idea that they're no longer enriching uranium does not mean that as soon as this deal ends with a sunset clause, that they can't immediately have a nuclear weapon. So I don't understand what it is we're actually getting here. It seems more that we are preserving Europe's interests rather than the United States' interests at the end of the day in this matter.
John, quickly.
The Iran deal does, in fact, allow for expanded inspections. It's been called the most intrusive inspections regime in the world. Iran, there's no evidence that they've sought ballistic missiles that can exceed the distance of the Middle East, so we're safe from those.
So they're not buying in ballistic missile technology from North Korea?
There's very little evidence for that, and no intelligence report has come out to say it. By the way, it's not just me that's saying Iran has complied. It's the International Atomic Energy Agency. It's James Mattis. It's H.R. McMaster before he was fired. Okay. It's Dan Coates, Director of National Intelligence.
The key question here is, if that is the case, why does Macron and France and others actually agree that this deal could be stronger? If the inspections are so great, if this is such a great deal, why do other people think that we can improve upon it?
I'll tell you precisely why. It's because they've been trying to placate Trump, who has decided he wants to back out of this deal despite the fact that it's working. Well, our entire military and intelligence community says that it's working. Last time we
we're not saying not the entire military, because you're wrong on that. I want to bring in Harmeet for a moment, because one thing we are missing, not the entire military apparatus, though. You keep naming one general.
Joint Chiefs of Staff? General Joseph Dunford? General John Hyten?
Can you have a little bit of respect, please, and let the other guests speak? Do you mind?
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's a lot of speculation here. We do not have the opinions of all the current apparatus, and that's exactly why we don't want former administration officials freelancing on these issues. The president does have the current intelligence, and I think it was a very good point that Europeans it's being called placating, but actually improving a bad deal is something that Americans and all Americans should be in favor of. And I, for one, don't trust that the Iranian government can be taken at its face value, and it could improve the inspections. So I think that I look forward to seeing what the president does. I think his negotiating style is actually very effective. He knows what he's doing, and he's the only person who gets to speak on behalf of the government on this point.
Well, that's a great point. And rolling over and handing out billions of dollars, I don't know if that's effective policy. But, Ron, one thing I think a lot of folks are missing, too, are internally within Iran, there's a major pushback. We saw them snuff out some sort of what could have been the beginning of another revolution earlier in the year. But we're hearing reports of strikes and of people pushing back against this government. And I think this also adds pressure internally to change, maybe make it more of a democratic country.
Couldn't agree with you more on that point, Charles. I've heard some of these reports, and unlike President Obama, who turned his back on the young people in Iran who were seeking democracy and freedom and liberty, I believe President Trump's style of leadership has actually opened the door in North Korea, in Iran, and certain despotic regimes around the world to the young people rising up and saying, we want democracy, we want the ability to govern ourselves, and enough is enough. So I am encouraging the president to continue what he's doing in these test spots around the world, Charles, because it seems like it's working.
Yeah. We've got 30 seconds left, John. Today, Iran floated out the idea that they would stay in the deal if we got out, and sort of floated this out to Europe. Would our European partners stay in a deal without America?
I think they plan to. And look, if the United States backs out tomorrow, it'll make Iran look like the victim. It'll drive a wedge between us and our European allies, and it'll prevent us from being able to prevent an Iranian nuclear weapon, which is what this deal does.
All right. Well, I disagree, but we all are entitled to our opinion. Thank you all very, very much. You're all very smart and passionate. Appreciate that. In the meantime, to dial up 3 straight sessions, and we are learning that state coffers are starting to fill up. They call it supply-side economics, and it works. We're going to discuss the market and maybe stronger economy next.